Welcome. Today, we are talking about finishing strong, reflecting on growth, and building momentum for what's next. So, for those that are attending live, please feel free to use the questions and answer prompt for any questions you may have. I do like to field questions in the moment. So anything that comes up, you can use that prompt or you can use the chat. And for either of these options, please feel free, if you don't want to use those, that you can email me afterwards. I'll share my email a couple of times through this. So let's dive right in. So welcome to Finishing Strong. You may be here for yourself, you may be here for someone else, but these moments where we're able to take pause and take stock really do matter. So as semesters end, as the school years come to an end, work quarters come to a close, our routines are shifting, we can often feel like we're just making it to the finish line. But that feeling of just like success, I'm done, let's move forward, let's rest. That collapsing at the end, we're actually losing an amazing opportunity for growth. And so what today is really going to be about is what if we use this time to reflect, regroup, and prepare ourselves for the next phase to come back stronger. And so today is the opportunity to begin doing that. So what will we be covering today? We're going to be framing this opportunity. We will be then understanding reflection as a tool for us to actually use to fuel growth. We will be using and developing a framework for how to reflect well. We'll be moving from reflection to future readiness. And then we're going to wrap it up and give some prompts for support to move forward. So let's first dive into this finish line trap. Why do we just collapse? Why do we just get to the finish line and stop there? And so what ends up happening is a lot of the times we're pushing very hard to get it to the end. And once we're there, we're just burnt out. Like there's nothing else. And so that respite feels so good. And we just are like, it's done. It's like we're closing a book and ending that chapter and picking up the next book, rather than stopping and taking stock on that book that we just closed, that chapter that we just closed. But what's really going on here is that we have cognitive overload. So oftentimes our brains are running at capacity and it just feels like there is no space left to reflect. And then when our brains do catch up a little bit and we don't feel so drained, it's already in the past and it's like it hasn't happened. There's that aspect of burnout and relief. So this emotional fatigue plus this concept of I've made it, it's over, leads to an instant drop in effort. It's almost like our stress response, our fight or flight was going for so long that once we get to the finish line, it just shuts down and then we're just ready, like so happy that it's over. There is this I'm done mentality as well, where once you're at completion, you just stop. It's like a checklist. It's off my checklist. I'm done. But we don't ever really stop to really reflect on that comprehension. I go back to like in high school when you might take an exam and their teacher, I don't know if you guys remember those teachers that took forever to grade it. Well, how do you reflect on how you studied and what you did well when there's such a gap between that reflection piece? And so a lot of the times when we go through a very busy season, whether in work, whether in school, we're just trying to get to the finish line. And then once we're there, we feel done. But this trap, really what the trap that we're looking at here is that we have this aspect of relief versus reflection. And relief tends to overpower. The relief of the removal of that stress is so overpowering. We have this feeling of exhaustion, but that comes at the expense of this evaluation. And then we check it off of our list, but that's coming at the expense of what are the learning opportunities for growth there? So when we collapse at the finish line, we're really missing the chance to learn what actually worked or didn't work and why. And so this is preventing any future strategizing that we may want to do. And let's explore why, when there is a gap, why that reflection isn't as impactful. So for just a quick poll that I'm just going to briefly launch here, I'd love for you guys to answer this prompt of, when you finish something big, what do you usually do first? So do you find yourself collapsing and moving on, just moving on to the next thing? Do you find yourself celebrating? Do you find yourself analyzing what happened? Or do you tell yourself that I'll reflect later, and then you rarely do? So if anyone in the audience that's attending live would not mind filling that out, I'll give it just a second. But while you're doing that, let's just break down each of these. So oftentimes that collapse and move on is just because there's 20 other things to worry about, right? And so you're just, okay, that's done. Thank God. Let me move on to the next one. If we celebrate, that's great. I'm going to go out. I used to do this with like college finals, right? When I was wrapping up finals, I'd go out with friends and I'd go and celebrate. Very rarely do we stop and actually analyze what happens, but that is where there's so much learning that can occur. And another one that often happens is, oh, I want to learn from this, but I just don't have the capacity now, and so I'll do it later. And so a majority of the votes that came in fall into collapse and move on. But I want to challenge you guys on this briefly, that collapse and move on leads to perpetuating, because that next thing you moved on to, if you don't reflect on that, how do you improve it? How do we prevent ourselves from getting to such a point that we just want to collapse? Because that shouldn't be the normal, that we get to the finish line and we just collapse. It shouldn't always be that we're running a marathon, right? There should be times that when we're running some sprints that we don't want to collapse at the end. But how do we get to that point? That's what we're going to continue to explore. So let's dive a little bit into what this missed opportunity is. So it's not just that when we don't reflect that we're forgetting what happened. We're losing this opportunity for insight. And so when we skip reflection, our memory fades fast. So the details blur. You may remember the outcomes, but you're not remembering as effectively what caused them. What things in your control led to that outcome. And so I know I do this. I work with a lot of college students, but even with the adults that I work with, anytime we get to a finish line, we are always trying to book an additional session to reflect. Because if you leave too much time, you may remember I got a C in this class, but you may not remember all the things that you did that led to it. Or let's do it on the positive end. If you get straight A's, do you remember what led to that? If you don't remember effectively what led to those outcomes, how do you use them again? So you remember the outcomes, but not what led to them. Emotions also tend to color the story. So stress, disappointment, relief, these all are distorting how we interpret what happened. And so the farther away emotions begin to fill in our memories, you often can have a very glossy view. And I find myself a lot in coaching, helping remind those people I'm working with what was actually going on. Because we tend to look through our past and our memories through this kind of rosy tint that makes things look better than they actually were. And they actually are preventing our growth and learning. Without this reflection, mistakes end up repeating. And so the patterns stay hidden, your growth stalls, and you walk into the next situation, which may be similar, in a very unprepared fashion. So what can we gain right now by reflecting? So reflection is how we turn our experiences into future strategies and growth for ourselves. So this moment isn't just a break. It can be a breakthrough opportunity for us, but it's really up to us to capitalize on that, to make this reflection something that we want to lean into. So when we do build in time to reflect once we get over the finish line, it can sharpen our decision making. It helps you recognize what worked and why. It can help you with avoiding past missteps by identifying those missteps and what you can do to prevent them in the future. What you can also gain is building up our metacognition. And we'll talk a little bit more about metacognition, but you can get a clearer idea on how you think, how you react, and how you operate under pressure. And it can also help you. I was really stressed out towards the end. It became more efficient. That didn't work for me. And so, how did that impact how my brain was working? And so, this reflection is building and flexing those metacognitive muscles in your brain. It also helps with creating forward momentum. So by reflecting on what worked, you can feel good about yourself. I did some things that really helped me get to this point. I want to use more of those. But it can also be, hey, I don't want to make the same mistakes I made in the past. So how am I going to adapt it so I don't end up in the same place? Remember, a lot of the times that feeling of just getting over the finish line, it feels good to get over the finish line. But when you're rushing, when you're cramming these things in towards the end, that does not feel good. But that feeling of not feeling good, that's going to dissipate. And so your fuel, your motivation to create change is typically going to be highest if you reflect sooner to the outcome, as opposed to if you wait. If you wait 2 months to then try to reflect on it, that feeling of how crappy you felt towards the end is going to disappear. So really what we're doing now in these moments at the finish line is by the things that we're going to talk through, you're going to be able to increase your effective decision making, your metacognition, and build momentum to sustain future growth. Periodically, I'm going to pause to see if there's any questions in the chat. So what is reflection really? So it's not just looking back. It's not just looking in the past. It's not relitigating the past. It's an active process of making meaning from your experiences. And how we use that meaning becomes very important. So by reflecting back, it's noticing what happened and how you responded to it. You can't control things outside of yourself, but we can control and adapt how we respond to these things. So by noticing what happened and how you responded, we're learning more about ourselves, building up that metacognition. It helps with making sense of your choices, habits, and results. Why did I do this? What led to that? Now hindsight's 2020, but how can I use this to move forward? You can help with translating insights into future strategies. So by reflecting, this is helping inform what we want to do in the future. If I could go back in time, what would I do different? Well, you can't go back in time, but similar situations may come in the future. So in that sense, we can turn hindsight is 2020 into something just looking towards the past and make it actionable to better our future selves. So true reflection is about building awareness, and it helps drive improvement because we really can't fix problems unless we're aware of them. So our experiences fuel reflection, which then provide us with insight, which can inform future actions. But what often happens is when we get to the finish line, we're losing this reflection piece. And without the reflection piece, we're losing the insight into ourselves. And so it's almost like we're jumping right from an experience to future action without any real growth and any real hope for change. It moves us away when we build in reflection time to really reflect on what we did. It's moving away from constantly being reactive to be moving ourselves towards proactive strategies. So, why is our memory unreliable later in the first place? So, our brains don't archive experiences like files. Our brains are always looking to be efficient. We can't store everything, nor would it be effective. So what our brains are doing is to be efficient, we're filtering out certain parts of our memory, we're editing those memories, and then certain ones are fading away. There also can be a bit of an emotional piece where if you don't have a growth mindset, things that you regret that you wish you did differently can actually impact us, where we remove them from our memories because they make us feel bad about ourselves. And so that's some of that rose tint that I was talking about. When reflecting backwards, our memories may adjust to keep our egos feeling good, to keep our self-concept positive by actually filtering out the things that we wish we did differently. And so without getting too much into like neuroscience, time weakens details. The longer you wait, the more context and nuance you lose. And often, if there was an easy answer of how to improve the next situation, next school year, next work quarter, if there was an easy answer, you most likely would take it. And so, what leads to sometimes these poor outcomes, or this feeling like I'm just trying to get across the finish line, those tend to be in the nuance. They tend to be in the small details. And so the farther away we are from the experience, from when we reflect, the more of that context and nuance you're losing. Those incomplete memories then really lead to incomplete learning. So without the timely reflection, your brain is filling in the blanks, but it's not always accurate. And so your learning experiences are more disjointed and may not actually be based in reality. And as I hinted at, this emotion distorts recall. So the stress relief or frustration can reshape how you remember what happened. If you're really frustrated with yourself, your emotions may impact where you then focus on what everyone else did, as opposed to focusing on what you could have done differently. So to dive a little bit more into, and I love metacognition, it just really is so important. So let's dive a little bit more into reflection building metacognition. So metacognition in simple terms is thinking about your thinking, but I often like to expand it a little bit, where metacognition is having an understanding of how your brain works, understanding what will set you up for success, what will set you up for failure, and using that information to inform strategies. And so that is, if I gave you 3 different strategies to accomplish something that you're trying to accomplish, can you tell which one will work best for you? Can you think about why it would work best for you? And that concept is so important, where reflection helps build metacognition, because now you can actually see, did that strategy work for me? Why did it work for me, or why didn't it work? And that's how it's building metacognition. So when you reflect, you may notice patterns: what worked, what didn't work, what was automatic that you just did without thinking. Did that help? Did that not help? What did you do that was maybe intentional? What did you intend to do that you ended up not doing? All of this stuff is useful information. It also helps with understanding your process. How did you approach challenges? What maybe did you do down to the wire that was really effective that maybe you should have done sooner in the process? Again, to help you think about this for the next time. What strategies did you actually use? Or what strategies did you skip over? Were those the right decisions? Why did you skip over strategies, or why did you use strategies? All of this is helping build up your metacognition. And then also adjusting with awareness. So the more insight you have, the better decision systems and self-management the next time. And so I'm going to use myself developing this presentation as some examples through this. So I decided to mix up how I was setting up my presentations. I'm reflecting, I'm close to the finish line right now for delivering this presentation. But I decided I was going to try and do it on Canva this time instead of just on PowerPoint. Now let me reflect on this. I do well doing things at the last minute. I do. I get motivation and it helps fuel me. But this strategy of implementing a new tool, not the best time. Because now not only did I need to build, like this strategy of doing it at the last minute typically works, but it didn't work when I was integrating a new tool and resource. And so now I'm reflecting on, okay, when I'm doing something new, I need some additional time. And so now I understand that while I may, using existing tools, be able to do things 48 hours before, if I want to implement a new tool, I probably need to give myself 72 to 96 hours in advance. Now, this is building up my metacognition that when doing the same things, I can do them well with crunch time. But when I'm implementing new things, I need to build in some more time to give myself a little wiggle room so I'm not racing to the finish. So developing metacognition is like building a user manual for your own brain. You can't optimize what you don't understand. And so reflection is an amazing tool to help you build up that user manual for your brain. Quick reminder, if anyone has any questions, feel free to use it. So strategic growth requires adaptation. You can't improve what you don't examine. And so efficient goal-directed behavior depends on knowing what to keep and what to change. But how do you know what to keep and what to change unless you're reflecting with accurate memories of what worked and what didn't work? So it's important to reflect using an understanding of inputs versus outputs. So naming what you did is a very important aspect. What actions, tools, or habits shaped the outcome? What was in your realm of control? What were your inputs? And then what results did that lead to? So when I did X, it led to Y. Was Y what we wanted to happen? And was that optimal? That's great. And this clarity helps create control. So you can't directly impact, or let me phrase that differently. You can't pull levers on outputs. So I couldn't just say, finish my presentation early. All I can control is my inputs. When did I start working on the presentation? And so by identifying these inputs and outputs, you're creating a framework for reflection. Inputs are those levers that you can change in the future. Outputs are those measures on, was this effective or not? What do I want to change? Should I change it? What inputs led to really good outputs? I want to use those inputs more. What inputs led to bad outputs, bad outcomes? I don't want to use those inputs anymore. And so when you're able to create that clarity of what you did that led to an outcome, that helps give more of a sense of control because now you're identifying what you can change. And this can be very empowering. I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with that They seem like they're resistant to growth and reflection and change, but it's just that they don't know what to change. They don't know what their inputs were because they haven't learned how to stop and take stock and reflect. Another really important aspect is to really go through this strategy awareness, these strategy awareness prompts. So label the strategy. So often people just go through like a pinball through life and they don't realize what some of the strategies they used. Was it time blocking? Did we block off large chunks of time for you to be dedicated doing certain tasks? Were you avoiding? That is a strategy, not an effective one, but sometimes people avoid things as a strategy so that they don't get stressed out. Was there last minute motivation? That's me doing this presentation, right? And in this case, that strategy didn't work. My input was prepared towards very close to the presentation, but the output was I was scrambling, even just still today, to get this presentation ready. Identify the why. What drove your choices? So understanding reflecting on this aspect of why did I avoid? That way you can better understand setting up strategies moving forward. You want to be repeating what works and replacing what doesn't. And when you do build in this framework of looking at inputs versus outputs, it's helping you repeat the inputs that led to good outcomes and replace the inputs that didn't lead to good outcomes. So for whoever wants to join in and do this, I'd love for you to reflect. So we're about to be into a holiday weekend. The quarter might be ending for some people. If this is any students joining in, if it's a college semester that's ended, I want you just to reflect on something over the past 3 months. What's one thing you did? And this could be bigger picture or smaller picture, but what's one input you had? And then what output did that lead to? And can you name the strategy behind it? And there's probably a couple of different strategies, but think about what strategies were you using? Very similar to how I said I was using my last minute motivation to help drive up getting this presentation done. The result it led to is, yes, I got this done today, but I wasn't able to get to a lot of the other work I needed to get to. And then think about, was this strategy intentional or accidental? In my case, it was actually accidental because I got it in my head that I wanted to use Canva this time. I didn't intentionally adjust my strategy based off that. So I was accidentally using the same strategy before. If anyone wants to, you can share over your example in the chat or in the Q&A if you'd like, and I'd be happy to talk through it a bit. But just even don't worry about how enhanced it is. Just even if it's very simple, this simple act of reflecting is giving you more information about yourself and what you may be able to do different next time, or what strategies really are working for you to use next time. I will say, one reflection on me moving over to Canva for these presentations, I feel like I can make them look a lot nicer. So now what am I going to do? So that was a bit accidental of tying this in, but now I'm going to start thinking ahead on how can I capitalize on the good parts of my strategy for this presentation using Canva, but decrease the ones that led to poor outputs, me cramming at the end. So doing it 48 hours in advance was not a good strategy that I'm not going to want to use for the next presentation. Okay, so I see when they came in. So time blocking to reduce task switching. It was very intentional to reduce fatigue and burnout. Awesome. So that task switching, this is learning a bit more about your brain. Some people are really good at task switching. So just that reflection is helping maybe you see that task switching is very draining for your brain, building up metacognition. And then when you might be looking at your calendar, maybe you see, oh my God, this is going to be a day. I already have 5 meetings. I'm going to have to jump between a bunch. maybe I should block out the rest of the time in my calendar, because if I have to switch so much between all of these different meetings, it's not going to be well. So just that aspect of reflecting on time blocking. Now, that's not to say that time blocking is definitely going to work, but now you can reflect again on if your strategy was working. And that's what's beneficial about being more and more intentional. The more intentional you are about strategies, the easier it is to label the strategy and see if that input leads to those outputs you're looking for. I'll keep an eye out if anyone else throws anything in. Happy to address them. So let's just dive in a little bit to the reflect, learn, and apply cycle. So reflection isn't just about looking back, it's how you prepare to move forward. So we start off with reflecting. Something, we got to a finish line. The most concrete one is like end of quarters, end of like a month, end of a school semester. So I can't emphasize how important this initial question is of, before you jump into reflecting on the outcomes, what was your intended goal? And I only emphasize this, I'll use a student example. I had a student that said, I took my exam and I think it went well. And I go, great. Do you think your studying was effective? And the student said, yes, because I feel like I did well. I go, well, what did you do to study? And what we did is we built out, well, what did you intend to do to study? And what did you actually do? And what we saw was that his original goal, it's not what he did at all. And so the reflection on it just was removing all of this aspect of, I didn't study for a week in advance like I intended to. And what actually ended up happening is when he got the grade back for the one that I'm thinking of, he didn't do as well as he wanted to. But by stopping and reflecting on, what was the goal for how you were going to study? We were able to just make it more clear on, did we achieve that goal or not? Focusing on the inputs. So reflecting on what happened, what helped or hurt, which then that allows for learning to occur. So what patterns or insights can we pull from this experience? What can we use this reflection data to inform or that I can work on moving forward? And then it leads to the applying. So how am I actually going to use this moving forward? How can I develop some of these new strategies and put them into action so that the next time I stop to reflect, I can see if these new strategies are working and helping me accomplish my goals. So just a quick example, I stayed up late to finish my, let's say, my presentation. I realized I need earlier deadlines. Using the deadline of when it's due or when my presentation is, that's not good enough. So maybe I need a deadline 2 days in advance to have something finished. And then what I'm going to do to apply this moving forward is I'm going to set reminders 2 days before it's actually due or before it needs completed. And that's going to be my new due date. That way I'm building in a buffer for 48 hours just in case something goes wrong, like using a whole new application to develop presentations. So, I'm sorry that these lines are not looking good, but we're going to finish strong with the RISE framework. So RISE is our problem-solving framework, and it's recognize problems, identify strategies, strategy implementation, and evaluate effectiveness. But we typically use RISE in a more immediate lens. So what is the immediate problem? What are some immediate strategies that we can work on? And use. Let's actually implement those strategies right now to be able to try and address the problem and then evaluate if that strategy worked. The difference with this finish line concept is that it's not immediate. Oftentimes, it's actually looking forward over a period of time. So if it's a student that has finished their junior year of high school, they got 2 months of summer. So any learning and planning or strategies that we develop really aren't going to be used, most likely, for 2 months. If it's reflecting on a work quarter and it's the end of the quarter and we just got over the finish line in quota, there might be some gaps in time before you actually need to apply those strategies. So what we can do is adapt the RISE framework a little bit. And so what we do here is recognize the roadblocks and the problems. So what could have gone differently? What could we have done to make this more efficient? So we want to do this as soon to the finish line, because the longer you wait, the more context and nuance you lose. Then you can identify what are the things, if I had a time machine and can go back in time, what would I do differently, right? That way we can identify what to try next time, what strategies. So what new or different strategies could help next time, or what strategies really worked that I want to make sure I do use again. Now, this is where the biggest change between the two RISE frameworks work. Instead of strategy implementation, it becomes strategizing a plan for the future. So for a student that maybe, let's say, didn't hand in homework for second half of the year, they fell so far behind and they just were doing homework every waking hour in the last 2 weeks of school to get everything submitted so that they could do well. Well, what are things that led to falling so far behind that it piled up? What are things that we can do? Maybe it's something as simple as every vacation. If you're behind on homework, you use vacations to catch up. But what is going to be the plan of what we can do different? What tools, supports, or routines should be in place to act on these strategies in the future? And how can we get these things set up now? And so sometimes this can be as simple as, let's create a plan of action and some strategies, and let's set a little reminder to revisit my document before the new school year begins. That way you're getting your thoughts and reflection out. Maybe you're getting some strategies and plans in place to think about using, but then you're creating a next action step of how do we make sure we're actually going to use it. And then you want to evaluate the next time it comes up. You can preview a little bit. What would success look like? If I use these strategies, what would that success look like? What are we going to look for? And how maybe can we adjust things in the future? But that evaluate the next time it comes up turns into the next reflection point on reflecting on, hey, did I use those strategies I set up? Did I access the supports I wanted? And did it actually lead to the outcomes that I wanted to see? So we don't want you just finishing. We want you understanding. So here are some prompts and questions to help you make meaning and build future strategies. So as I mentioned, and I'll probably say this 3 more times, but what was your goal at the start? What did you intend for the outcome? Because we don't want to just say, well, I always wanted to get an 80, but, really the original goal was to aim for a 90. Because what that loses there is, how do you know if the strategies worked in achieving your goals if you're changing the goal? So starting off with, what was my original goal? What helped move you forward? What made it easier? What made it more efficient? And what got in the way? And you can have constructive self-criticism. So really understanding that, maybe that didn't really help out, that I tried, like this past weekend, I was planning to work on this presentation, but then I decided to go out with friends instead. And, that really got in the way. That was silly that I did that. What strategies did you use? Were they intentional or reactive? Very similar to the previous prompt. So understanding that when we have reactive strategies, it tends to be irrational. But if we lead in with intentional strategies, we're actually strategizing. And what are you proud of? This is sometimes a very powerful thing. What are you proud of that you did that led to these outcomes, that led to this finish line? What surprised you? Maybe you never thought you'd do something, but you did it. Was it good or bad? just starting to get these wheels turning and thinking this way, reflecting on your experiences, reflecting on your strategies. And then what do you want to carry forward or what do you want to leave behind? And sometimes what I do to really help this when I'm working with clients is I present things over like, if I gave you a time machine and we're 1 year from now, would you be happy if you use the X, Y, and Z strategies again? And they're like, absolutely not. Because that feels so far in the future that you're giving yourself opportunity that now you can actually work on it. And so you're actually really highlighting by this aspect of what do you want to carry forward or leave behind. You're instilling this growth mindset that there's opportunities to change this. But the only way to be able to change it is to know what we want to change and what we should be changing, as opposed to just hoping change happens. So you don't want to be waiting for the next fire drill. So you want to be using what you learned before you're in the middle of it again. Because when you're in the middle of the fire, you're not going to be focusing on, I really should have listened when they were telling me where the fire extinguishers are. And okay, no, you're going to be freaking out and just trying to get over the finish line again. And so this period of reflection is when the fire's put out and you're really able to start identifying what are some skills and strategies that you might need to work on before you need them, before you need to solve any crises that come up. Because when a crisis comes up, you're not worried about long-term growth. You're worried about getting across the finish line. And that's when the cycle just perpetuates. So reacting is stressful, but preparing is giving you power. So if you only plan when you're overwhelmed, you're just going to keep repeating the same cycle. So it's often that if you pass up on this reflection period, what you're really doing is you're passing up on any preparing yourself for the future. Patterns create predictability. So you can start to see what gets hard, but you can now build supports around it. When you can start seeing your own patterns, you can really start targeting strategies to limit those patterns from coming up. And by preparing for something similar may happen again in the next busy season, you're helping with your own emotional regulation. So by previewing what may come up in the future, by reflecting in the now, you're able to lower stress, improve your decision making, and build momentum. So this is the cycle we often find ourselves in when we're just focused on getting across the finish line. We have stress, we react, we then experience burnout, and then we repeat the cycle, which then leads to stress, react, burnout, repeat. And this is unsustainable in the long run. This is when you're just a pinball bouncing through life. But what we want to do is reflect to help break us out of this cycle so that we decrease stress the next time and we can get into a more positive growth cycle as opposed to a stress reactive cycle. I must have forgotten to put my little image at the top. So sorry you guys can't see my face right now. So build forward momentum. So growth isn't going to happen overnight. You're not going to change everything all at once. It doesn't require overhauls. It actually thrives on small intentional shifts. And so you want to start with what worked. Build on strategies that already supported your success. Not everything needs to be starting from scratch. You want to choose 1, 2, max 3 focus areas of change and what you can do differently. Clarity does beat complexity. So you want to try and pick one place to apply your insights to. And then you want to make sure you're designing this reflection and what you're going to do the next time it may come up. But you want to design this that's something that's actually attainable and doable. It doesn't need to be ideal, but we want to make this something that you'll actually use. And really, this is like a key piece of goal setting in general, that you don't want to set too many goals all at once, because then you're not going to achieve any of them. So what worked gives you a foundation, proof that progress is possible. It builds up our confidence that we're not all broken. We have some things that do work. We did get across the finish line, right? But some of it could probably be made better. Not everything needs fixing, and we can start where one shift would matter most. And if there's one thing you meant to do but didn't, that's our leverage point to start creating change. And the magic of this is as we start creating these small changes that are sustainable, it's going to start impacting and have a spillover effect. And that's the momentum that can get built up. So whether your next step starts tomorrow in a few months, the time to design it is now. So to design your momentum plan, your plan should really be carrying you forward, whether that starts tomorrow or in a month. This isn't just about goals, it's about building the conditions to succeed. So what I want to present over just 4 steps here. So you want to define your goal. What's one outcome you want to achieve in the next season, the next school year, the next semester? You want to map the how. What strategies will help you reach it? What worked this time? What will you like to try differently? So again, time machine is a powerful metaphor. Give you a time machine to 1 month ago. What would you do differently? And then that is informing what we can do next time by creating a roadmap. What needs to happen when? Outline those key steps, checkpoints, or routines. And those are self-monitoring points. So let me go back to like the falling behind on homework and things piling up towards the end of the year. What if we just did a touch point once a month to see if I'm falling behind? And then I catch up on Sundays instead of trying to catch up all in the last 2 weeks before the semester or the school year ends. And so that's part of building your safety nets. How will you stay on track when your motivation dips? What supporter systems will prevent the old patterns from taking over? And most importantly, preventing that reactive cycle from taking over. So here is just a little bit of design your momentum plan. So you can map out, what is my goal? What is the change I'd like to see based on this reflection? You can think about what helped you achieve it this time to get over the finish line. You can identify what you'd like to try next time and build in a little bit of a timeline. And so you can have some safety nets and supports that can help you achieve that goal. And so this is just so important. Again, once you get over the finish line, now is the time to be thinking about your momentum plan because it's fresh in your head. What I would like to offer over to anyone either that's watching this after the fact or anyone attending live, if you'd want to do like a 15-minute working session on doing this together, just email me. It's casey@nfal.net. We'll find a time to hop on. I'd love to do this as you get over a finish line to help create this momentum plan for yourself. I'll leave it on just in case anyone wants to screenshot or take this, but as a reminder, all of these get thrown up on YouTube, so you can always watch it after the fact as well. So now, just to move into wrapping up, growth is a cycle, not a grade. It's normal to avoid, especially when reflecting can feel uncomfortable. It can be hard to build out this time when all you want to do is rest. But this reflection is a skill, and like any skill, it gets easier with practice. So your brain tries to protect you from the discomfort. That's why it's tempting to just move on. That was uncomfortable. That didn't go well. I just want to move on and go to more positive things. But remind yourself, you're skipping learning. You're losing opportunities to learn and grow by doing that. Reflection and strategy are ongoing. So there's no final exam for life, just the next opportunity to try again. These slip-ups aren't failures, they're data. So really understanding that by looking at this data, that clarity that's built in there, it's informing more of your decisions. So these more slip ups is really things to lean into. I slipped up, and so this is going to make it clearer of what I can do different next time. Momentum builds over time. So what matters most is showing up for yourself again and again. Don't worry about drastic changes. Worry on small, manageable, sustainable, incremental changes. And this is all a growth mindset in action. Not I got it right, but I learned and I adjusted and I informed my future self. Future me, thank me later with this reflection piece. So, really going through reflect, learn, plan, implement, and grow. By the way, my strategy of using Canva, you can see I had to convert it over to PowerPoint at the end. And now I'm noticing some of that strategy didn't work because I didn't catch all of these little typos and the spacing being a little. So I'm happy to answer any questions in the last couple of minutes. Again, if you prefer to email me or find a time to talk, always happy to do so. My contact information is up there. Casey from New Frontiers Executive Function Coaching. I live and breathe this stuff and I love it.